So we are looking at the earth element, and we're looking at how to use the earth element as a way of reflecting and of abandoning the interest in the body specifically. So this is a long contemplation on this particular topic. So we're going to move on to the next part here. And this is what comes next. Others might treat that mendicant with disliking, with loathing and detestation, striking them with fists, stones, sticks and swords. They understand this body is such that fists, stones, sticks and swords strike it. But the Buddha has said in the simile of the saw, even if low-down bandits were to sever you limb by limb, anyone who had a violent thought on that account would not be following my instructions. My energy shall be roused up and unflagging, my mindfulness established and lucid, my body tranquil and undisturbed, and my mind stilled in samadhi. Gladly now let fists, stones, sticks, and swords strike this body, for this is how the instruction of the Buddhas are followed. So this is one of these very famous similes of the Buddha, the simile of the saw. But before we get to the simile of the saw, it is again worthwhile just dwelling very briefly on the very first part here. Yeah, and again, is this idea that other people may treat us in really bad ways, and sometimes they may abuse us verbally, other times they may abuse us physically. And here we are talking about someone who is violent towards someone else. They use their fists, their sticks, and their swords or whatever. And the right way to think about that, says the Buddha, is the right way is not to blame the other person, but the right way to think about this is to understand that the nature of this body, the body is such, the nature of this body is that it gets hit by fists, stones, sticks, and swords. This is the nature of the body. It is not the problem, is not the other person. The problem is that we have this body. The world that we are immersed in, the world that we are part of, the world of humanity, the world of material phenomena will always give rise to these kind of problems. The problems with, there's always going to be violence, there's always going to be swords, there's always going to be sticks, there's always going to be wars, there's always going to be weapons, there's always going to be violence happening. This is the nature of the world. And if you have this body, that is actually the problem. That is something you can do something about. And again, it is this marvelous way of looking at the world in an impersonal way. We no longer make it personal. It's no longer about the other person being bad or evil. It is just understanding that the world functions like this. We cannot step out of this world as long as we have a body. The nature of the world is such that it will give rise to these kind of issues. And then again, we can let go a little bit. We can have more compassion for the other person. We can understand them, trying to see the world from their point of view. And then that changes the whole equation. It changes the way we think about things. And then only in that context does it become possible to understand the simile of the saw, because the simile of the saw otherwise is very difficult to make sense of. And the simile of saw, as we see here, is the simile. It is found in the Majjhima Nikaya number 21, the simile of the saw. And if you want to read that sutta, it's called the Kakachupama Sutta, literally means the simile of the saw. And it has a long sutta, and it ends with this particular line, this particular way of instruction. Even if bandits were to sever you, cut you apart, limb from limb, anyone who had a malevolent thought on that account would not be following my instructions. It seems almost impossible. How is it possible that someone is sawing you limb from limb in this way and treating you in an extremely bad way, and you don't have any anger at all. You don't have even any irritation. Why are these people doing this? And you have nothing like that at all. It's very, very hard to really grasp how that is possible. But it is possible once you understand that this is the nature of the world. These people who are doing this, they don't understand what they are doing. They are blind. They are hindered by ignorance. They don't understand the nature of what is happening. And because they don't understand what they are doing, they are actually creating an enormous amount of suffering for themselves. If you take a good person and you dismember them, you saw them apart, limb from limb in this way, a good person, you're creating enormous amounts of bad karma. And that enormous amount of bad karma, they have no idea that they're doing this. They don't understand what they're doing. And when you see that, when you have an insight into what actually is going on, you can have compassion for those people. And that is why the Buddha says that even in this case, we should have a mind of loving kindness. We should have a mind of compassion, even in these extreme circumstances. And the point is that it is possible. Yeah, it can be done. That is the point. And of course, if that is how you deal with the physical body, if that is how you deal with the earth element, yeah, you understand it as just an element. It is just the nature of this elemental world that we have. This is really the contemplation here. You can use that in this particular way to actually end up with metta and compassion instead of anger. So again, it's an interesting take on how to contemplate the form element. Yeah, this is the earth element, Patavi Dhatu. It's an interesting way because it's very different from what perhaps you might expect. And of course, if you are able to do this, if you're able to practice in this way, the consequence of that is your energy will be roused up and unflagging. Your mindfulness will be established and lucid. Your body is tranquil and undisturbed, and your mind is immersed in samadhi. Yeah, if you can think about the world in this way, if you can look at people in this way, then it has very powerful consequences, because that whole world, you kind of reject it. You're no longer interested. You understand that the nature of the body is to receive all of this kind of punishment. Well, actually, in that case, the body is no longer interesting. The earth element is no longer interesting. And you start to reject the whole thing. And you become peaceful and at ease instead. And then meditation becomes possible. And then you think, yeah, if you want to exaggerate a bit, you think, well, gladly now, let fists, stones, sticks, and swords strike this body, for this is how the instructions of the Buddhas are followed. Gladly, I think it means like whatever, yeah, whatever. If this must happen, okay, let it happen, because this is the nature of the world. I can deal with it. This is kind of the idea behind this. So this is this very famous simile of the very famous simile of the bandit. So the two-handled saw is really what it is, the simile of the saw. And this is how you can use it in a very kind of profound way. If you really want to take these teachings to their utmost limit, this is what you would do. So let's have a look at the last part here. While recollecting the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha in this way, equanimity based on the skillful may not become stabilized in them. In that case, they stir up a sense of urgency. It is my loss, it is my misfortune. That while recollecting the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha in this way, equanimity based on the skillful does not become established in me. They are like a daughter-in-law who stirs up a sense of urgency when they see their father-in-law. But if, while recollecting the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha in this way, equanimity based on the skillful does become stabilized in them, then they are happy with that. At this point, much has been done by that monastic. So, recollecting the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha is, remember that what we are recollecting here is the simile of the soul. Yeah, this is a teaching of the Buddha. So you are remembering that this is what the Buddha taught. this is the teaching, and the Sangha are the ones who follow the instructions. Yeah, they follow the instructions, and then they let go of the anger or the ill will. So this is what it means here by the fact that you are recollecting the Buddha and Dhamma and Sangha. You are recollecting a teaching, and this is how you recall this. And when you do that, the idea is that equanimity is supposed to be established. Yeah, if you're able to think like this about a very difficult situation, if you're able to allow a bandit to cut you apart limb by limb and not get angry with it because you understand this is the nature of reality, it's a very, very high bar to clear, but we can all move towards that a little bit. Yeah. And if you really are able to do it, equanimity is supposed to be stabilized. You're supposed to be cool, yeah? Have a cool heart and just allow it to happen. Just watching the body falling to pieces and knowing that you are okay anyway, because in the long run, you are doing the right thing. But for most people, it will not work, yeah? We try this and actually you get really angry with the other person. You're not supposed to cut me apart. What are you doing? Get that saw away. I don't want to be cut apart by a two-handled saw. This is unfair. You know, we don't want this kind of thing. And it takes a very developed mind to be able to do this. Yeah, and the equanimity is very likely not to be aroused. So what we need to do, we need to try very gradually to move in that direction, to try to see the world in a new way. I've been talking about right view so much, but this is also an aspect of that right view. Almost everything here is an aspect of right view. We learn to view difficult situations in a new way. You learn to view people as not agents who want to harm someone else, but you learn to view people as just habits. They are personalities that have been formed by the past. They are like the agents of nature carrying out what nature requires. It's just nature doing its thing. A person is no different from the wind in the trees. If there is a wind in the trees and the wind is a bit stronger, it may be unpleasant because the sound is very loud and there may be a kind of disturbance coming with that. But you don't get angry with the wind in the trees. Maybe you get a bit irritated or you have a bit enough, but you don't really get angry because you know there's no point in getting angry with the wind. People are just like the wind in the trees. People do things because of cause and conditions in the past, just like the wind does things because of cause and conditions. It's the weather patterns that create the wind. It is the patterns of behavior in the past, the people we have hung out with in the past, because we didn't have Kalyana Mittas, because we had Papa Mitta. A Papa Mitta is the opposite of the Kalyana Mitta. It is the bad friend. And a lot of people in the world have bad friends. And because they have bad friends, they get conditioned in bad ways. And when they're conditioned in bad ways, they just do bad things without really understanding what they are doing. We are so blind, we are walking in darkness. If we look at humanity and if you look at yourself, if every one of us, if we look at ourselves, we know that sometimes we are in the darkness. Sometimes we don't really understand. Sometimes we make bad mistakes in life. This is just the nature, and we don't really know what we're doing. We don't understand the harmful consequences of what we're doing. And this is what is happening to these people, these bandits. They too have no idea what they are doing. They are like the wind in the trees, caused and conditions in a certain way. There is no self inside that is stable and expresses itself in such a way that it controls what is going on. It is just cause and conditions. That is the problem. And when you start to see that, you start to feel sorry for these people. You start to feel compassion because you know that they are creating so much suffering for themselves, so much problems for themselves. They want happiness. They want to go towards happiness in the future, but actually they are moving towards suffering. They have no idea what they're doing. So while this terrible situation is happening to you, you start gradually to reassess that situation. understanding that situation in a new way, understanding it in such a way that you actually start to have more equanimity. But in the meantime, the equanimity is not there. And when the equanimity is not there, Venerable Sariputta says, in that case, you stir up a sense of urgency and you think, it is my loss, it is my misfortune that even though I remember the teachings of the Buddha, I recall the Buddha, his teachings and the Sangha in this way, I do not have equanimity based on the skillful states. And you understand how important it is, because as long as you don't have that equanimity, you will have the defilements of the mind that will lead you astray. And in your next life, next time around, when you're no longer a Buddhist or whatever, you're going to make mistakes because of that. You will be conditioned by the bad qualities, and you will end up doing the wrong things as a consequence. So this is the idea here. And then you remind yourself, okay, why am I getting angry? This is the nature of these people. They don't know what they are doing. So then you are like the daughter-in-law, who stirs up the sense of urgency when she sees her father-in-law. Or it could be the son-in-law who stirs up the urgency when he sees his mother-in-law. It could be the similar kind of thing. The reason why it is daughter-in-law is because in ancient India, it was always the daughter who went to the family of her husband. So she would live with the husband's family. That's why it is the daughter-in-law seeing the father-in-law. But the way we live now, it could also be the son-in-law, maybe seeing the mother-in-law. Similar kind of thing. You feel a sense of urgency when you're... I have never been married, so I don't know about this. I don't know how this works. But if you have been married, then maybe you have some idea. You see your father-in-law, think, okay, I better behave. These are my in-laws. I got to make a really good face towards my in-laws. I got to be polite. I got to dress nicely. I got to do all the nice things. So you have a sense of urgency. Now is the time to behave. Now is the time to live in the right way. So then, if you then are successful, if you do recall the teachings in the right way, then if equanimity based on the skillful qualities are stabilized in you, then you're happy with that. And at this point, much has been done by that monastic. To say that much has been done seems a bit like a understatement again, because if you're able to act on the simile of the soul and not get angry in this kind of situation, I would say, wow, you are almost like a saint. This is kind of really astonishing that you can live in this way. But this is the idea of understanding the earth element fully. And when you understand the earth element fully in this way, you end up with loving kindness, with metta, you end up with karuna, compassion, and you even end up with upekkha in the end. The upekkha, the equanimity, the calmness of the mind as a consequence of reflecting on the earth element in the right way. So actually very profound, this earth element reflection. If you take it all the way, it is extraordinarily profound. So then the question is, which one of these things should we focus the most on? What is the most important of these things? And I would say that if you are going to understand the body and you're going to overcome the body as a hindrance in meditation, I would say the most important one is actually just to understand that the nature of this body is the same as the nature of the world outside. This body and the world outside are basically the same. And if you can understand that much, you can give up some of the attachment to the body. These other practices here are also useful. If they work for you, you can use them, but they are more advanced. They take you further down the line. It is a contemplation of the earth element, which is more profound, if you like. But still, you can use them if you like. But the most important thing, the most urgent thing for meditation practice, to deepen your ability to follow the breath, is to get a bit more distance to the body, a bit more perspective on the body, understanding that the body actually really in the end has nothing to do with you. So this is the contemplation of the earth element. And now Venerable Sariputta is going to show us a similar kind of contemplation for the other three elements, the water element, the fire element, and the air element. So now that we have seen the basic idea of how this works, we can go through the last part much more quickly, because it is basically the same thing that we see throughout here. So let's carry on with the other three elements, the three dhatus. What is the water element? The water element may be interior or exterior. And what is the interior water element? Anything that is water, watery, or appropriate, that is eternal, pertaining to an individual. This includes bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease, saliva, snot, synovial fluid, urine, or anything else that is water, watery, and appropriated, that is internal, pertaining to an individual. This is called the interior water element. So we have the same thing we had before, this distinction between external and internal. And the internal here, you can see these are the appropriated things. This is me, it is part of my body. And the list of things here are taken from the list of the 31 parts of the body. So these are more like the watery parts of the body. Some of the things are maybe a little bit strange, fat and grease. I don't know, I wouldn't normally call that water, but maybe it has a watery kind of aspect to it. It's a bit fluid. Grease is movable quite easily, so it has some kind of watery quality to it. That's maybe the idea here. But anyway, it doesn't really matter exactly how we divide it up. The point is that this is the movable aspect of things, pertaining to oneself, that we are attached to. This is the internal water element. The interior water element and the exterior water element are just the water element. There's no difference between you and the world outside. This should be truly seen with right understanding like this. This is not mine, I am not this, this is not myself. When you truly see this with right understanding, you grow disillusioned. You are repelled by the water element. The mind detaches from the water element. You belong to nature. Just like with the earth element, the water element belongs to nature. Comes out of nature, goes back to nature. There's no real distinction between your body and the nature around you. We're always exchanging things, always exchanging water, always exchanging earth. Things peeling off us, drinking in new things, taking in new things, and then this eternal cycle going on. How can this be yours? When it belongs to nature, it cannot really be yours when it belongs to nature in this way. This is not who you are. This cannot be yourself. And when you see that, you become disinterested. This water element, the earth element, the body is no longer interesting. Your mind detaches from it. It gains a greater degree of peace as a consequence. There comes a time when the exterior water element flares up. We saw this before, the kind of the upheaval of the water element. And when that happens, it sweeps away the villages, the towns, the cities, the countries, and the regions. There comes a time when the water in the ocean sinks down 100 leagues, or 2, 3, 4, 6, up to 700 leagues. There comes a time when the water in the ocean stands just 7 palm trees deep, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and even just 1 palm tree deep. There comes a time when the water in the ocean stands just 7 fathoms deep, or 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, or even just 1 fathom deep. There comes a time when the water in the ocean just stands half a fathom deep, waist deep, knee deep, or even ankle deep. There comes a time when there isn't enough water in the ocean even to wet the tip of your finger. So for all of this, all of its great age, the water element will be revealed to be impermanent, liable to end, vanish, and perish. What then of this ephemeral body, appropriate by craving? rather than take it as I or mine or I am, they still just consider it to be none of those things. Yeah? So exactly the same as the previous one. But here we have this idea of the water, all the water in the world drying up. And this is exactly what I was saying before, is this idea from the suttas, from the 7 sun suttas, that as the sun expands, eventually the earth will be transformed. All the life in the earth will die, all the water will eventually evaporate. And this is taken from that sutta. It's the same kind of idea. All the water in the world will be gone. So what about this body? What about this little body that we have with a little bit of water inside? You can imagine how this body is going to evaporate very fast if the whole earth evaporates. We will be turned to dust. There will be nothing left. Yeah, it is just so unreliable, so uncertain. So when you do that, you no longer consider it I or mine. It is part of nature. It is impermanent. It is you cannot really appropriate it. You cannot control it. So you give it up and you consider it none of those things. And then you have the same sequence as you have with the earth element. All of the same recollections apply also to the water element, the simile of the saw and all of that. And then it ends up, if while recollecting the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha in this way, equanimity based on the skillful does become established in them, then they are happy with that. At this point, much has been done by that mendicant or that monastic. Yeah, so the same kind of ideas, if someone treats you badly, if they speak to you in the bad way, or they treat you badly in terms of violence or whatever, then this is how the Buddha says we should deal with that. Yeah, and then same thing with the water element as with the earth element just before. So nothing all too exciting. Yeah, it's a similar kind of idea how to think about the world. But again, this idea that all the water on the earth dries up is quite extraordinary, because there isn't really any basis for understanding how they could have known this at that time. Yeah, this is 2,500 years ago. In fact, during the break we just had, I said before that at one point the whole earth is covered in water. I just looked it up on the internet, and it seems that at one point, 2.5 billion years ago, or 3 billion years ago, it seems like the scientists think that there may have been a time when the whole planet was just water all the way around. Yeah, so there seems to be some kind of support for that from modern geology and modern scientific research. Anyway, so there you are. That is the contemplation of these elements. And you will see again that the next passages here are very similar to what we saw already. But it's nice to do the full sutta, so I will just carry on with this a little bit, and then we'll see where it takes us when we go through this. So the next one here is about the fire element. So what is the fire element? The fire element may be interior or exterior. And what is the interior fire element? Anything that's fiery, and appropriated, that is internal, pertaining to an individual. This includes that which warms, that which ages, that which heats up when feverish, that which properly digests the food and drink, and anything else that's fiery, and appropriated, that is internal, pertaining to an individual. This is called the interior fire element. So basically it is the warmth of the human body, and here it also adds a number of other things that are like fever, for example. We can sort of agree with that, and anything that has to do with the heat of the individual. Obviously we attach to this because you want to feel warm and all of these kind of things. So this is an important part of what we attach to as the body. And then it says that the interior fire element and the exterior fire element are just the fire element. When you die, whatever heat you have in the body goes back to nature. There is no real separation between you and the fire and the elements outside. These again are exchanged. If it is cold outside, you get cold. If it's hot outside, you get warm, etc. These things are always being exchanged. You are not that fire, that heat. That heat itself is uncertain. And when you truly see this with right wisdom like this is not mine, I am not this is not myself. When you truly see it in this way, again, you grow disillusioned with the fire element, detaching the mind from the fire element. So more of the same, but this time the idea that the body is warm that you are holding on to, and you can see why that is kind of important, because the heat of the body is obviously an important part of what individuates us from the world around us. And this is why I think the fire element is talked about separately here, because it is a very kind of obvious aspect of the physical body, that it kind of has a stable temperature and that it has a individuated, it has a separation from the world outside. But when you realize even the heat in the body is not really yours, it is kind of exchangeable with the environment, never really solid, never something you can hold on to in the same way, then again you realize this too has really got nothing to do with me. And then gradually, as you see this, you become disillusioned with the fire element. It is all one fire element, all related to material phenomena, to the body, the physical body, and then you become less interested in that too. Let us come to the last of these elements. Sorry, first of all, we finish off the fire element. There comes a time when the exterior fire element flares up. It burns up the villages, the towns, the cities, the countries and regions, until it reaches a green field, a roadside, a cliff's edge, a body of water, or a cleared parkland, where it is extinguished for lack of fuel. There comes a time when they go looking for a fire, taking just chicken feathers and strips of sinews as kindling. So, for all its great age, the fire element will be revealed as impermanent, liable to end, vanish, and perish. What then of this ephemeral body appropriate by craving? Rather than take it as I or mine or I am, they still just consider it as none of those things. So here it seems to be saying that there comes a time when even the fire outside is hard to find. The point is just to show that these things are impermanent. You never know if fire is going to be available or not. It is always uncertain. When the whole earth is flooded with water, there's not going to be much fire going on. So I guess that is one point when this is all extinguished. So, okay, fair enough. I'm not sure if this is so easy to relate to, but anyway, I think we get the general idea about what is going on here. If while recollecting the Buddha, the teaching, and the Sangha in this way, equanimity based on the skillful does become established in them, they are happy with that. At this point, much has been done by that mendicant. So, the fire element, internal and external, is the same. Air element. The air element may be interior or exterior. What is the interior air element? Anything that's windy, and appropriate that is internal, pertaining to the individual. This includes the winds that go up and down, the winds in the belly or the bowels, winds that flow through the limbs, the in-breath and the out-breaths, or anything else that is windy and appropriate, that is internal, pertaining to an individual. Or you could say air, the air may be more appropriate here. This is called the interior air element. The interior air element and the exterior air element are just the air element. This should be truly seen with right understanding like this. This is not mine, I am not this is not myself. When you truly see with right understanding, you reject the air element, detaching the mind from the air element. There comes a time when the exterior air element flares up. It sweeps away the villages, the towns, the cities, the countries, and the regions. There comes a time in the last month of summer when they look for the wind by using a palm leaf or a fan, and even the grasses and the drip fringe of a thatch roof don't stir. So for all its great age, the air element will be revealed as impermanent, liable to end, vanish, and perish. What then of this ephemeral body appropriated by craving? Rather than take it as I or mine or I am, they still just consider it to be none of those things. So again, this idea that the wind element is sometimes it is incredibly powerful, very, very strong. It sweeps away the villages and towns. And we can see this sometimes these days. We see the storms around the world, very violent storms, and it's getting worse with climate change happening. Things are getting worse. And that is one extreme. And on the other extreme, we have times when things become completely still and there is no wind at all. It's as if the wind element comes to a complete end. And it kind of varies between these kind of extremes. In other words, it is unstable, it is unreliable. We don't know if it is always going to be there. And so for this reason, basically, we then become disenchanted, disinterested in the wind element. I think the wind element is not so hard to feel disenchanted about. It is, I don't think we become so attached to the breath or whatever, but maybe sometimes we do, but not so often. And then we get the full expression again, the full expression that we saw with the earth element. Now we get the full one for the air element. If others abuse, attack, harass, or trouble that mendicant, they understand this painful feeling born of ear contact has arisen in me. That is dependent, not independent. Dependent on what? Dependent on contact or dependent on experience. They see that experience, which includes feeling, perception, choices, and consciousness, as impermanent. Based on that air element alone, the mind becomes eager, confident, settled, and decided. This is the same thing we saw before, We experience all of these problems in the world because of ear contact. We hear people saying bad things to us. It is just the nature of things. And it is dependent. It depends on that contact. And all of these things arise because of that. And then you get fed up. You get fed up with the air element. Based on that air element, because you are fed up with the element, your mind attains stillness. Samadhi becomes confident, settled, and decided, which basically means you start to attain samadhi in your meditation practice. Same thing as we saw for the earth element just before, just reinforcing the same idea. Others might treat that mendicant with disliking, loathing, and detestation, striking them with fists, stones, sticks, and swords. But they understand it is the nature of this body that it will be struck with fists, stones, sticks, swords, will strike it. But the Buddha has said in the simile of the saw, even if low-down bandits were to sever you limb from limb, anyone who had a thought of hate on that account would not be following my instructions. My energy shall be roused up and unflagging. My mindfulness established and lucid, my body tranquil and undisturbed, my mind immersed in samadhi. Gladly now let fists, stones, sticks, and sword strikes this body, for this is how the instructions of the Buddhas are followed. Same thing again, the idea of the nature of the body and the idea of following the simile of the saw. I've already talked about this. I will just pass over it now, just going through and reading it to the end. While recollecting the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha in this way, equanimity based on the skillful may not become stabilized in them. In that case, they stir up a sense of urgency. It is my loss, it is my misfortune, that while recollecting the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha in this way, equanimity based on the skillful does not become stabilized in me. They are like a daughter-in-law who stir up a sense of urgency when they see their father-in-law. But if, while recollecting the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha in this way, equanimity based on the skillful does become stabilized in them, then they are happy with that. At this point, much has been done by that mendicant. So that is the 4 elements. And now we are coming to the end of this sutta. It's going to talk about a few more significant issues towards the end here. So let us take the sutta all the way to the end. It's a very interesting sutta, this particular sutta on the elephant's footprint. So let's come to the very last part here. When a space is enclosed by sticks, creepers, grass, and mud, it becomes known as a building. In the same way, when a space is enclosed by bones, sinews, flesh, and skin, it becomes known as a form, as rupa. Yeah, this is another way of doing the element contemplation right there. We haven't seen this before, but just as a building is described by the things that make up the building, the bricks, the mortar, the cement, in ancient India, the sticks, the creepers, and the mud, it is exactly the same with a body. A body is just whatever is built up out of these various things. It is bounded by skin, and it uses the sinews and bones and these kind of things to hold it all together. It is no different from a house. It is no different from a building. It is just material phenomena coming together in this way. So next time you see a house, you can say, well, that's just like my body. And that might be an interesting kind of contemplation for you right there. Reverence. Though the eye is intact internally, so long as exterior sights don't come into the range, there is no corresponding engagement. There is no manifestation of the corresponding type of consciousness. Though the eye is intact internally and exterior sights come into range, so long as there is no corresponding engagement, there is no manifestation of the corresponding type of consciousness. But when the eye is intact internally and exterior sights come into range, then there is a corresponding engagement, then there is the manifestation of the corresponding type of consciousness. So this is quite an interesting passage, and this shows us how the idea of sense perception arises. So for sense perception to arise, you have to have the eye. The eye has to be there. You have to have external sights, and you have to have the attention. Correspond the engagement. The engagement just means that you attend to that particular thing. This is how there is the manifestation of the corresponding type of consciousness. So, for example, if you are in a deep state of samadhi, then the eye is still there, but there is no external sight. The external there is no external sight because your eye sense has been shut off in a deep state of samadhi, and because there is no external sight, you won't see anything. Or you might see something. You might kind of have your eyes open. There might be external forms, but you are thinking about something. And because you are thinking about something, you're not paying attention to the thing that you are seeing. And because you're not paying attention to what you are saying, there is no conscious engagement. You don't actually experience saying. What you experience is thinking, because you're caught up in your mind. I'm sure you can all relate to what I'm talking about. But when the I is there, the external object is there, and you are paying attention to that external object, that is when you have I consciousness. That is how I consciousness arises. Yeah. So the point of all of this has many kind of interesting little points to it. But one of the interesting points is that how we pay attention to the world is very much how we experience the world. If we pay attention to the world in a certain way, we will experience the world in a certain way. It is what we are interested in. It is what drives the attention, yeah, which actually determines how we experience the world. So if you use your attention wisely, if you look at the right kind of things, if you look at the things with the right kind of attitude, then you will experience the world in a certain way, depending on that attitude, depending on how you actually look at the world around you. How we attend to the world is a very important part of how we experience the world. Sometimes people think that, well, actually, it is not about me, the sights just come to me. Yeah, the sights are just there. It is not about me at all, because the world is just here. But actually, that is not really true, because a lot of the time, it is not the world that comes to us. It is our interest in the world, and so we go out looking for these things. But if you are a very skilled meditator, you're skilled at attaining samadhi, for example, you're not so interested in the world. You don't really pay attention to the world outside in the same way. The world is still there, but there is not driven by craving and desire in the same way as it is for many other people. So this idea that attention, and this is quite unique to this sutta right here, that this idea of intention is part of the problem, means that we have a means of reacting to the world in the right way, by attending in the right way. We are not passive. We're not just passive receivers of all the sense contact. We are active engagers with the world. And because we are active engagers with the world, we can choose how we want to engage with the world around us. And this opens up a large number of possibilities in dealing with the world in the right way. Let's go on. Let's move on now. Form produced in this way is included in the five grasping aggregate, in the grasping aggregate of form. The feeling, perception, choices, and consciousness produced in this way are included in the corresponding grasping aggregate. Whenever we engage with the world, whenever we look at things, hear things, the five aggregates are right there. Yeah, the form aggregate is there because that is how the hearing or the seeing happens. There is a feeling associated with it. It feels good, it feels bad. There is a perception associated with, now I am looking at the screen, so the perception of screen is right there. Yeah, there is a choice. The choice is I choose to look at this particular thing. And then there is a consciousness, awareness. Whenever we experience the world in this way, all the five aggregates come into existence in a particular way at that particular point. So they understand this is how they comes to be. Inclusion, gathering together, and the joining together into these five grasping aggregates. This is how the aggregates arise every moment. They arise through our engagement with the world. But the Buddha has said, one who sees dependent origination sees the teaching, and one who sees the teaching sees dependent origination. And these five grasping aggregates are indeed dependently originated. The desire, adherence, attraction, and attachment for these five aggregates is the origin of suffering. Giving up and getting rid of desire and greed for these five grasping aggregates is the cessation of suffering. At this point, much has been done by that mendicant. So what the person is seeing here is that when you, at the beginning here, this is how there comes to be the inclusion, the gathering together, the joining together in these 5 aggregates, means that it can mean a number of things, but one of the things is that because we are reacting in the world, through desire, we are building up the aggregates in the future. Yes, we are building these things up, and this is how they express themselves in our life in this particular way. But then you remember that all of these things are dependently originated. If you understand that things are dependently originated, and dependent origination is the same thing as seeing the Dhamma. When you see the Dhamma, you also see dependent origination. It's the same thing, right? Because dependent origination is really just the second noble truth. Dependent cessation, which is the ending mode of dependent origination, is equivalent to the third noble truth. So these are fully with each other, fully included with each other, because you understand that these 5 aggregates are dependently arisen. You understand this all originates through this particular sequence. And you also understand that the reason why they have originated is precisely because of the desire, adherence, attraction, and attachment for these 5 aggregates. So what this means is that you understand every time you have a sensory experience, every time you see the world, and what you are experiencing is the 5 aggregates, you try to avoid having any attachment to that. You see the downside in attachment to those things. It comes from here. Starting point is the aggregate of form, but that aggregate of form, which is similar here to the idea of the air, the air and the earth and water and all of these things, that aggregate of form is the starting point for all of these kind of arising of all the 5 khandhas. So what is going on here is that the Buddha, first of all, he goes from the 4 noble truths, 4 noble truths to 1 noble truth, then to the 5 khandhas, then to the form khandha, and then to the patavi, the earth element, and now he is reversing that process. He's showing how the earth element becomes the form khandha. The form khandha then is like the dependent origination, and it takes it all the way back to the aggregates, the first noble truth, and reversing the original sequence that he was talking about. This is really what is going on here. So these 5 khandhas have dependently originated. You understand that if you keep on desiring these things, they will carry on. So you start relating to your experience of the world in a new way. You try to avoid dealing with it through desire and greed and these kind of things. You understand this is the problem. And this is kind of the insight of the stream entry that we are seeing at this point. And of course, then when the Bosariputta says, at this point, much has been done by that mendicant. You are really starting to understand the problem in a profound way here.